My cousin and I were fishing late at night. We decided to go around 9 p.m. since that's when it's the best time for us to get a bite. We go to our spot and there was nothing but the two of us. The lake and the normal other random animal sounds, which we were used to. About 30 minutes into our peaceful night of fishing, suddenly things went quiet. If you have ever gone to our spot, you know that just does not happen. We didn't say anything, and we kept on with our night. But suddenly, there was a loud screaming sound coming from behind us. I turned to look at my cousin, but this time his face was pale, and we asked out loud at the same time, "Did you hear that?" "Yes, I did." "What was it?" "I don't know. I've never heard that before." As much as we both tried to ignore it, we kept alert, but then it passed, and after about an hour or so, we had forgotten about the incident. We didn't catch much, so we decided to pack up and call it a night. When we were headed back to our truck, we started hearing rustling leaves behind us. We turned around, thinking it was an animal, but nothing was there. We kept on, and right as we were about to hop in our car, a woman appeared right in front of us, a few feet away. She looked dirty and a little bit up, with some blood stains on what seemed to be a nightgown of some sort. We shouted, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She continues to stare at us. Then the shrieking scream we had heard before came out of her mouth. My cousin and I were petrified and got into the car and drove off. Haven't gone to our spot ever since. We have never told anyone what happened, but I can still hear that scream from time to time. Only once when I was fishing did I have a ghostly experience, and that was when I was fishing at a lake in France. I'd been there for a couple of days, and my time was really nice and peaceful. There was an old chateau nearby, riddled with bullet holes from the Second World War. Anyway, this lake is in a French army training area, so it was pretty secluded. During the late afternoons, I had the feeling of being watched from the woods at the far end of the lake. Each day, at the same time, the feeling would return, usually around dusk and from different areas, as if whatever it was getting closer. The last night of my trip, it was very foggy, and I could hardly see the dim glow of my battle arms. I decided to make a brew, and as I flicked on the lighter, the spark silhouetted the face of a helmeted German soldier peering into the darkness. The next morning, I packed up and went home, but not before speaking to an old French estate warden, who told me that the chateau had seen some fierce fighting when the Americans liberated that area of France. The Germans had fled into the woods, only to be ambushed by a patrol in reserve. They were all killed and buried around the lake. I don't think I'll fish there again. My mother, sister, and I recently went on a weekend trip to a private lakefront cabin. For the most part, it was a great trip, although I didn't get much sleep at night. Both nights of our stay, we heard several noises, such as knocking, creaking, and footsteps in the loft and on the deck. I had a very unsettling feeling at night. I took several photos of the trip and was amazed when I uploaded them to my PC upon my return. I am still trying to prove myself that the images are not more than camera flaws or something. Trust me, I don't want to believe that they are ghosts. So anyone that sees them is more than welcome to tell me if they think that I'm making something out of nothing. The owner of the cabin wrote an autobiography about his life. I read it while I was there. He mentioned in the book about his cabins on the lake, and I was kind of freaked out to read that several people have chosen to spend the end of their lives at these cabins, and some have had their ashes spread out into the lake and on the property. One thing I know for sure is that whatever that was, it made me stay away from lake areas for a long time. The story you're about to read is true and not made up in any way. One of my friends actually suffered a nervous breakdown after the incident and needed to go into counseling. I had 3 really good friends, and their names were Kevin, Ryan, and Tommy. Every summer, our parents would take us on vacation. We always stayed in a remote cabin in the forests of Minnesota. The cabin was located on a large island in the middle of Lake Vermillion. Eventually, when we were old enough, our parents let us go to the cabin on our own for the first time. When we got there, we parked the car on a gravel road beside the lake. Then, we had to take a boat across the lake about a half-mile to reach the cabin. There were a few other cabins on the island, but they were all at least half-a-mile away. The cabin was quite small, and it only had a kitchen, a bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. At night it was pitch black. There were no street lights for miles, and the only light came from the moon. There were no curtains on the windows, so when you were sleeping there at night, you could see the moon shining down on the trees and the lake outside. On the 3rd night of our trip, we set up a campfire by the edge of the lake. The moon was full, and the pale white glow was shimmering across the lake. We were gazing up at the stars when all of a sudden we heard a splashing sound, as if something was moving about on the water. Ryan suddenly stood up and pointed, saying, "What the hell is that?" We all looked in the direction he was pointing, peering into the darkness. After a while, I could make out what he was pointing at. I'll never forget the feeling of terror that came over me. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and goosebumps appeared on my arms. I was paralyzed with fear. Out in the middle of the lake, there was a woman's head. It was just floating there on the surface of the water, staring directly at us. She had pale white skin and long black hair that was matted across her face. The rest of her was submerged or not even there. We tried to tell ourselves it was just a loon. They're black and white birds that hunt at night, diving deep into the water. It didn't look like a loon, but that's what we tried to convince ourselves it was. We threw some more wood on the fire and tried to forget about it, but it still gave me the creeps. About an hour later, I had to go to the toilet, so I walked down to the edge of the dock and peed into the lake. Looking out over the moonlight lake, I noticed the thing was still there, but now it was much closer. It still looked like a woman's head, and it still seemed to be staring right at me. Its face was still extremely pale, as if it hadn't been out in the sun for years, and I could easily make out some facial features, the eyes and the nose. A feeling of incredible unease came over me as I realized it couldn't be a loon. There was no way a loon could tread water for that length of time. There were no ripples around it either. It wasn't moving at all. It was just standing there, stiff as a board, submerged in the water. I immediately zipped out my pants and ran back the dog to where my friends were, sitting around the campfire. I told them what I had seen, but none of them dared to go down the dock to take a closer look. We tried to tell ourselves it was just a log or a tree branch jutting out of the water. I could tell everyone else felt uneasy too. None of us really believed that. We went back into the cabin and shut the door, locking it behind us. It was very late, and we needed sleep. None of us mentioned the thing in the lake. We were all trying to avoid talking about it. There were no curtains on the windows, and as I was getting ready for bed, I couldn't help taking one last look. Peering out the window, I could see the lake clearly, illuminated by the full moon. But the thing wasn't there anymore. It had completely vanished. I let out a sigh of relief, thinking the log must have floated away, or else it just sunk below the surface. Or perhaps it had been a loon after all, and it had finally flown away. It was very hot that night, and we had to sleep with the windows open. My friend Tommy and I slept in one bedroom, and my two other friends, Kevin and Ryan, slept in the other bedroom. We left our bedroom doors open. I was finding it hard to sleep. It was the middle of summer, and there wasn't even a slight breeze. The heat was stifling. As I lay there, I thought I could hear someone walking around outside the cabin. I kept my eyes tightly shut and tried to tell myself it was just my imagination. It sounded like someone with bare, wet feet passing back and forth. I was trembling with fear, but I felt so weak I couldn't move. The footsteps sounded like they were walking up the steps to the cabin door. I wanted to shout out to my friends, but I was frozen in terror. Then the footsteps turned around and sounded like they were running down the steps and towards the lake. After a while, the footsteps faded away and there was only silence. I reached over and shook my friend Tommy. He was already awake, and he claimed he had heard the footsteps as well. Just then, I was startled to see Ryan come running into the room. When he stepped into the moonlight, I could see his face, and the expression on it was very disturbing. "We need to leave," he said. "Why?" I asked. "What did you hear?" "Let's just go," he insisted. "Let's get to the boat. It's time to go." He wouldn't answer. He just ran back into his room. We followed him and found Kevin sitting on his bed, already packing up his things. Ryan was running around, frantically grabbing his stuff and stuffing it into a bag. "What's wrong?" I demanded. Ryan, what the hell is wrong with you? Tell us. He just stopped in his tracks and stared at me. There was a haunted look in his eyes. I will never forget what he said. He told us he was turning over in his bed to get more comfortable when he suddenly saw at the top right corner of his window someone was peeking in. As soon as he set eyes on it, the face vanished. He said all he saw was long black hair hanging down the window, ghostly white skin, and one large eye staring at him. When he said that, it chilled us to the bone. We realized that if the face was in the top right corner of the window, that meant the thing had to be damn near 8 feet tall, or else floating in midair. I felt like I was going to be sick. "Let's just go," Ryan said in a very serious tone. "Let's just go now." We all agreed and packed our stuff as quickly as we could. We grabbed our bags and ran out of the cabin. As we scrambled down the front steps, I glanced to the side and saw footprints, bare, wet footprints, in the dirt all around the cabin. We ran down to the boat and threw our stuff in. We untied the boat from the dock and sped off. I looked back over my shoulder and stared at the island, but I didn't see anything moving. However, I had the strangest feeling that someone or something was watching us. When we finally reached the other side of the lake, we tied up the boat, stuffed our backpacks in the car, and drove off. We had been driving for about 10 minutes, when out of the blue, Ryan suddenly broke down sobbing. He kept saying over and over, "What was it, guys? Oh God, what did I see?" On the way, we called our parents to tell them what had happened. Ryan was freaking out, and we didn't know what to do. They told us just to get home safely and quickly. My friend's dad went up to the cabin a few days later and said he saw nothing out of the ordinary. However, he did mention that there were wet, bare footprints all around the cabin, which he thought was odd. Whatever Ryan saw in the window really hit him hard. After his breakdown, he had trouble sleeping and ended up having to go into therapy. They gave him some pills to calm him down and allow him to get a decent night's sleep. As time went on, he recovered and ended up being fine. But to this day, he still can't sleep unless the curtains on the windows are completely shut. To this day, I still cannot explain what we saw in the lake that night. I never went back to the cabin. Tommy and Kevin have both gone back, and everything was fine. But Ryan refuses to go back, and I'm with him. Hello there, and thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up, and if you like my videos and want to see more, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you all in my next video.